Welcome to Forgotten Media Episode 1. This is going to be a, hopefully, series where I discuss things I remember that for some reason I don't hear talked about in some, many, or all aspects. Today I'll be briefly discussing League of Super Evil, a show which, despite having been somewhat known once upon a time, seems to have been more or less forgotten. Let's begin with the plot. Nearly every episode of the show involves the League of Super Evil, which it took me way too long to realize was an acronym for LOSE, making some not very mischievous plots in order to, take over the city, get ice cream, get free food. Yeah, their goals sort of change from episode to episode. I mean, for crying out loud, even Doofenshmirtz generally stuck to trying to take over the tri-state area. I don't know what the League of Super Evil even wants here. Of course, given their acronym, they almost always lose, or when they do win, it's in the most accidental or workaround method ever. For example, there's this episode where they steal the reservation book to a restaurant, which apparently is binding once you write in the book, but in the process they also manage to blow up said restaurant. So, yeah, they technically won. Or this episode, where they make clones of themselves, which are better than them in every way, with the clones nearly taking over the world and getting rid of the League of Super Evil, but then the main characters accidentally win because the clones were broken, but the goal the entire time was actually to get someone to clean up after their dog. But hey, let's actually talk about the characters. We have Voltar, the leader of the group, despite being comically short. But that's okay, surely he must have some great evil plan-making skills, right? No. Or any plans that are good are completely accidental, or Voltar's plans are a means to an end for the next character, Dr. Frog. Now, of the entire main cast, this is probably the most truly evil of the bunch. That isn't saying much, but he's usually the one most exhausted with Voltar's ideas due to how often they either backfire, or take an incredibly convoluted amount of planning for the most ridiculously simple payoff. Now, why isn't Dr. Frog just leader instead? Well, despite his knack for inventing things, and his actually evil plans, he's not a very good speaker, so he can't really make demands like an evil villain would. But as soon as Voltar steps in to help with the speaking problem, he derails the entire thing. But hey, why not just get the next character, Red Menace, to help? Well, Red Menace is actually not very evil. Yeah, I think you're noticing a pattern here. He's polite, helpful, and generally only tags along because he either doesn't know a plan will hurt someone, or is simply obedient to Voltar. He also has a tendency to derail or mess up plans in his own way, though usually he simply just doesn't know. I'm making him sound like a dunce here, but he really isn't. Don't get me wrong, he isn't a genius, but I think he's just too nice to be a villain. Actually, I think there's a whole episode about that. And then there's Doomageddon, a dimension-hopping radioactive hound that can and will eat things you wouldn't think possible. He's also the character I'd call the most chaotic. Sometimes he'll help the other characters, other times he'll ignore their instructions, and many times he'll even sabotage them because he's hungry or he thinks it's funny. Doomageddon doesn't get nearly as much screen time as the others, but he's generally pretty good when he is on screen. There are also some other characters, some of which are recurring, and they range from decent to... Oh my goodness! Squidward! Now look, I think the designs of the main cast look pretty good, even some of the side characters, but the other characters just look... ugh. You can really tell not as much time went into them. I thought from my fuzzy memory of this show that this would be one of those shows where, due to the art style, it generally looks good no matter what. And while in some cases it's true, for some of the side characters, no, they really could have used some extra work. I think, however, that for the most part, the main cast works pretty well. It's a nice dynamic where the characters feel fairly balanced with one another, so that not one character takes up the spotlight. Is the show any good? So, is the show good? Well, it's decent, and it even has its moments. Don't get me wrong, this isn't the best thing ever, and the plots are generally fine, but for the most part, I don't hate the series. Now, I can think of many other shows that would probably go in front of the line compared to League of Super Evil, but overall, again, it isn't a bad show, at least to me. Not fantastic, but perfectly serviceable. How it ended and where it went. The series ended on a seemingly uneventful note. There's basically no information on this show out there, which is part of the reason why it's in this series. Sure, you can still find it rather easily depending on how you want to watch it, but in terms of people who remember it exists, basically no one has acknowledged this show in ages. I remember seeing one post about it a couple years ago on Twitter, and that's the only time I've heard the series mentioned since. There are 5 reviews of the series on IMDb, and I could only find 2 reviews and 1 compilation here on YouTube. While that's more than I thought there'd be, for so many people having supposedly watched this show, there's a surprising lack of coverage for it. It's like it existed for the time, then almost completely vanished off the face of the earth. I feel like I'm trying to handle Schrodinger's series, where if I open the box, the series may or may not exist anymore. So here, let me give you a brief rundown of what I could find out about where this series went. The series ran from 2009 to 2012, the final reruns apparently ending in 2014. This whole series was made by Nerdcore's Entertainment, which later got acquired by DHX Media, got turned into DHX Studios, which is currently operating as Wildbrain. Oh, hey, by the way, did you know that this actually came from a Canadian company, and it aired on Teletoon? You know what else aired on Teletoon and came from a Canadian company? Also, why is the pilot animated about 1,000 times better than any other episode? While researching this, I found out one of the leads for the show was learning Klingon. Huh. This is from the old website for Nerdcores, by the way. Speaking of which, do you know what happens to a lot of websites for TV shows when they end? Well, sometimes they'll stay around for a while, or maybe they'll be turned into redirects for either the channel they were on, or for the company which made them. Let's see what happened to League of Super Evil's website. Yeah, it's gone. But not like it doesn't connect gone. It connects fine, but the webpage is empty. Any content that was there is no longer there. There isn't even something like a JPEG of Voltar's face. But I did find an archived version of the site. Huh, it needs Flash. Boy, I sure hope that Flash support didn't end and break a bunch of things. Oh wait, that's right. But hey, it even had Flash games, such as this one, Air Voltar. I should probably stop before I dive down this rabbit hole even more than I already have. Can you find it? Now, this was the most irritating part of this video. You see, with series which have been more or less forgotten, it's rather difficult to find ways to readily view these, let alone ways to use it in this video to actually, you know, show what I'm talking about. Sure, they're all apparently free to watch with ads on Amazon, but that is quite the hassle, especially when it comes to using them in a video. Because I'd have to record all of the episodes individually in real time, or I'd have to plan out in advance what footage in particular I want to use. While that second one isn't impossible, it sure is a hassle compared to what I'm used to. Also, speaking from having watched the show, these episodes aren't really in HD from what I can tell. This is more like 480p stretched to fit an HD frame. Don't get me wrong, this show has the Wind Waker effect going on, so it looks good regardless, but I'm not wasting my time with the HD versions since, again, they're not really HD. Next, there's downloading it through other websites. The pro of this is that I could download all the episodes all at once, which would be much easier for editing. However, the problem is that some would decide to upload these in 360p, and they decide to skimp out on the bitrate too. So basically, if I were to use these, I'd end up with Crustovision. Oh look, while I was making this episode, I found them on YouTube too! Also in Crustovision quality. You know, I think the person who uploaded these just took the Crustovision versions they found on another website and just uploaded those. And look at this comment I found under the first episode. Oh lord, I finally found it. I thought this cartoon never existed because no one remembers. Man, talk about a fitting comment. Also, apparently only Season 1 was ever aired on Cartoon Network for some reason. But yeah, this Crustovision just isn't going to cut it. Sure, I've seen worse, but maybe it's the fact I know we can have better that's bugging me so much. But you know what? I've always said that if the original people are still selling it, that I'll generally go and buy the official copies. And apparently the DVD copies are still being sold. I don't know how many are left, or if these are still the same ones from the production run they did a decade ago. Oh, and also, I actually don't think these are the original people selling it, but oops. So don't worry guys, you've been getting the non-Crustovision version of this. But wait, this disc is copy protected, so what are we gonna do about that? Well, don't worry, there are other programs we can use. Needless to say, all this hassle I've had to go through sort of adds to just how forgotten this feels. In fact, that's the big question. Just how forgotten would I call League of Super Evil? Well, I'm going to introduce the Forgotten rating. This rating goes from 1 to 10, with 1 being so well known nearly everyone on the planet should know about it, and 10 being so forgotten that it borders on being more legend than fact. This show gets a 5 out of 10 on the Forgotten scale. While this did have DVD releases, and you can watch it streaming, kinda, I rarely hear this show talked about. As I've said, it feels like this show had its time in the spotlight complete with all the early 2010s trappings, then nearly vanished from existence. But that's all for now. Tell me what you thought of this first episode of Forgotten Media, and if you'd be interested in seeing more episodes in this series. Well, thank you all for watching, and take care.
3, 2, 1.